It all began on an ordinary Tuesday morning when the world woke up to a revelation no one saw coming. A quiet ripple spread across social media, a few hushed whispers at first, then a deafening roar. Doria Ragland, Meghan Markle's own mother, had broken her years of silence. The woman who stood gracefully in the background, calm and composed through every storm that surrounded her daughter, had decided to speak. And not just speak, she was writing a tell-all memoir. The announcement was simple but devastating in its implications. A statement released to a handful of major publishers read, "Doria Ragland has signed a deal to publish her memoir, a deeply personal account of her life as a mother, a witness to extraordinary events, and a woman finding her voice after years of being silenced." No mention of Meghan, no hint at the firestorm about to erupt. But those who knew the history, those who had followed every twist and turn of Meghan and Harry's turbulent lives, understood immediately. This wasn't just a book. This was a bombshell waiting to detonate. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For Meghan, the timing couldn't have been worse. She was already walking a tightrope, her carefully curated public image balanced precariously between adoration and suspicion. She had survived the brutal tabloid headlines in Britain, carved out a new identity in America as a philanthropist and media producer, and weathered the fallout from her and Harry's split with the royal family. Now, after years of managing every word, every photograph, every gesture, her own mother threatened to pull back the curtain and expose what Meghan feared most. The truth as Doria saw it. At first, Meghan didn't believe it. She brushed off the headlines as typical tabloid lies, designed to bait clicks and stir controversy. But then came the confirmation from Doria's team. It was true. The woman Meghan had leaned on in her darkest hours, the woman she trusted above all others, had agreed to bare their family's secrets to the world. The news sent a chill through Meghan's Montecito mansion. Harry found her in the kitchen that morning, clutching her phone with trembling hands. She had been scrolling endlessly, reading and rereading the news as if sheer disbelief could make it disappear. He called her name softly, but she didn't answer. When he finally touched her shoulder, she turned to him with eyes wide and glassy. "Harry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "She's going to ruin me." In that instant, Meghan wasn't the Duchess of Sussex, the Hollywood starlet, or the global advocate for women's rights. She was just a daughter staring down the unthinkable betrayal of her own mother. For years, Doria Ragland had been a symbol of quiet strength. She was there at Meghan's wedding, walking solemnly into St. George's Chapel alone, head held high as the cameras flashed around her. She stayed silent as Meghan was vilified by the British press, refusing to give interviews, never lashing out. When Meghan cried during her Oprah interview about feeling unsupported and unprotected, Doria stayed invisible, offering comfort only in private. But what had changed? What could drive a woman so private to suddenly open her life, and her daughters, to public scrutiny? Insiders suggest it wasn't a snap decision. Doria had been keeping journals for years, scribbling down thoughts and memories in quiet moments. Friends say she often spoke of how there's so much people don't know, and how difficult it was to watch her daughter rewrite history to suit her narrative. She reportedly told one confidant, "I stayed silent for Meghan, but no one ever asked about my truth." And now, her truth was coming out. In publishing circles, rumors swirled about the memoir's contents. Some said it would chronicle Meghan's fiery rows with palace staff, including the infamous bridesmaid dress incident with Princess Charlotte, which left Kate Middleton allegedly in tears. Others hinted it would detail Meghan's early Hollywood years, her relentless climb to stardom, and the parties on luxury yachts with powerful men, whispers Meghan had fought hard to bury. There were even suggestions that Doria might reveal private moments between Meghan and the late Queen Elizabeth, conversations where Meghan allegedly clashed with royal protocol and expressed frustration in ways that could now be perceived as disrespectful. If even half of it were true, Meghan's carefully polished image would shatter like glass. As the hours passed, Meghan's panic grew. She tried calling Doria, but her mother didn't pick up. Text messages went unanswered. Meghan paced the floor, alternating between fury and despair. "She can't do this to me," she said, over and over, as if repeating it might make it real. Harry tried to calm her, but his own anxiety was palpable. He knew what this meant. He had seen how quickly the media could turn, how they devoured reputations and left nothing but smoldering ashes. He had promised Meghan he would protect her, no matter the cost. But how could he protect her from her own mother? Somewhere across town, Doria sat in her modest home, sipping tea and staring at a blank page on her laptop. She had made her decision, but she didn't take it lightly. For years, she had watched in silence as her daughter rose higher and higher, building a world based on carefully managed stories. Doria loved Meghan, but she could no longer ignore the weight of her own experiences, the moments where she felt pushed aside or silenced in the name of her daughter's narrative. The question echoed in her mind. Was it betrayal to speak her truth, or betrayal to remain silent? And so, the stage was set. On one side, Meghan Markle, desperate to stop the memoir before it destroyed everything she had built. On the other, Doria Ragland, a mother who had found her voice and refused to let it be silenced any longer. What happens when love collides with truth? When loyalty is tested to its limits? And when a daughter's worst fear becomes her mother's liberation? The world was about to find out. The air in Montecito was unusually heavy that afternoon, though to the casual observer, everything seemed picture-perfect. The sprawling Sussex estate, nestled among sun-kissed hills and flanked by towering eucalyptus trees, exuded tranquility. Birds chirped in the distance, and a gentle breeze swept across the manicured gardens. Yet inside the mansion, an uneasy stillness hung in the air, a prelude to the chaos about to unfold. Meghan Markle sat in her private study, staring out the window but seeing nothing. Her mind was far from the idyllic California scenery. For years, she had been the master of her own narrative, weaving together stories of resilience, triumph, and love that captivated millions around the globe. Every public appearance, every carefully staged interview, every photograph released to the press had been curated to perfection. The world saw what she wanted them to see: a strong, compassionate woman who had overcome adversity to find her voice on the global stage. But now, for the first time, the power to control that narrative was slipping through her fingers. The phone call from her publicist earlier that morning still echoed in her mind. The words felt surreal, like dialogue from a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. "Meghan, you need to sit down. This isn't a rumor. It's confirmed. Your mother has signed a deal. She's writing a book." At first, Meghan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "That's ridiculous. My mother would never." She wouldn't. But as her publicist spoke on, sharing details about the publishing house, the tentative release date, and the staggering advance Doria was rumored to have accepted, the laughter faded. Meghan's heart began to pound so loudly she could barely hear the rest of the conversation. Her first instinct was denial. This was just another vicious fabrication by the tabloids, a desperate attempt to tear her down like they always had. But the names involved weren't fringe gossip sites. They were respected publishers, legitimate journalists, people who had never before printed lies about her. And worst of all, Doria hadn't returned her calls. Harry entered the room quietly, carrying 2 mugs of chamomile tea. He placed one gently on the desk in front of her and knelt down so that his eyes were level with hers. "You need to breathe, Meg," he said softly. "Panicking won't help." She looked at him with a mixture of fear and disbelief. "Harry, if this is true, if she really does this, it's over. Everything we've worked for, everything we've built, they'll destroy me." Harry reached for her hands, squeezing them tightly. "It's not over. We'll figure this out together. We always do." But even as he spoke, there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He, too, knew what the consequences could be. In the past, they had fought battles against outsiders, ruthless tabloids, judgmental royals, vicious social media trolls. But this was different. This was personal. How do you fight a war when the enemy is the woman who gave you life? To understand how it came to this, one had to look back, not just to Meghan's meteoric rise to fame, but to the years before, when her relationship with Doria was still uncomplicated, still sacred. Doria Ragland had always been Meghan's rock. As a child growing up in Los Angeles, Meghan had clung to her mother's quiet wisdom like a lifeline. Her father, Thomas Markle, provided financial stability but often clashed with Meghan's fiery spirit. It was Doria who soothed her tears, encouraged her ambitions, and taught her the value of resilience. When Meghan landed her breakout role on the TV series Suits, Doria beamed with pride. Even as Meghan became a household name, Doria remained a grounding force, never starstruck, never swept up in the glitter of Hollywood. Meghan trusted her completely, confided in her more than anyone else. But something shifted after Meghan met Prince Harry. At first, Doria had been supportive of the whirlwind romance. She watched her daughter fall in love and seemed genuinely happy for her. But behind the smiles and polite public appearances, there were murmurs of tension. Friends of Doria whispered about moments when Meghan dismissed her mother's advice, choosing instead to listen to high-powered agents and PR consultants. One even claimed that Doria felt frozen out during the planning of Meghan's royal wedding. She wanted to help, to be there for her daughter, said one source close to the family. But Meghan was so focused on her new life, her new identity, that she stopped listening. Still, Doria stayed silent. She didn't give interviews or leak stories to the press, even as Meghan's father did just that. Doria's dignity earned her widespread admiration, contrasting sharply with the Markle family drama that dominated headlines. But silence doesn't mean absence of pain. Over the years, Doria kept her thoughts to herself, retreating further into her own world. She began journaling, a habit she once shared with Meghan. Page after page filled with memories, reflections, and emotions she had never voiced aloud. At first, it was a private act of catharsis. But as time went on, those pages began to look less like a diary and more like the outline of a book. In Montecito, Meghan remained oblivious to her mother's quiet rebellion. She believed Doria was still the same steadfast ally she had always been, content to stay in the shadows while Meghan basked in the limelight. But Doria was changing. She began to question her role in her daughter's carefully constructed narrative. She wondered if her silence had enabled Meghan's version of events to become the only truth people knew. And when publishers came knocking, offering lucrative deals and promising creative control, Doria found herself tempted for the first time. The world saw Meghan Markle as a modern fairy tale princess, a woman wronged by an ancient institution and bravely speaking her truth. But Doria knew there were other truths, uncomfortable truths, moments Meghan would rather forget. In the study, Meghan's phone buzzed again. Another news alert flashed across the screen. Doria Ragland signs multi-million-dollar book deal. I'm ready to tell my story. Meghan felt her throat tighten. She couldn't breathe. Harry placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to sound calm. Meg, we need to talk to her before this goes any further. But deep down, Meghan knew it was already too late. The storm had begun, and there was no turning back. The news came like a thunderclap on a sunny day, sudden, deafening, and impossible to ignore. It was early morning in Los Angeles when the first reports hit the wires, but by noon, it had become the dominant headline across the world. Doria Ragland to publish tell-all memoir about life with Meghan Markle, read one headline. Meghan Markle's mother breaks her silence. Explosive revelations expected, screamed another. Even the British tabloids, which had long treated Doria as the quiet, dignified antithesis to Meghan's estranged father, suddenly turned their attention to her. Overnight, she was no longer the reserved, yoga-loving woman the world had admired at Meghan's wedding. She was now the mysterious author whose words might either vindicate her daughter or destroy her completely. Inside the Montecito estate, Meghan sat frozen on the cream-colored couch in the living room, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. The sunlight streamed in through the large windows, but it felt cold, almost harsh. Her world, so carefully curated and insulated, seemed to be cracking open in slow motion. Harry was pacing the room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair every few seconds. This doesn't make sense, he said for what felt like the 100th time. Why would she do this now? After everything. Meghan didn't respond. She couldn't. Her thoughts were tangled, looping back to the same unanswerable questions. Why? Why would her mother betray her like this? When she had first seen the push notification on her phone, Meghan had assumed it was another ridiculous rumor. The kind of clickbait headline that had dogged her every step since she married Harry. But when she opened the article and saw the carefully worded statement from Doria's team, her heart had dropped into her stomach. It is with great excitement that Ms. Ragland announces her forthcoming memoir. This will be a deeply personal account of her life, her experiences as a mother, and her reflections on love, loss, and resilience. Ms. Ragland feels that now is the time to share her truth. Her truth. Those two words echoed in Meghan's mind like a threat. She read the statement again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But no, there it was in black and white. Doria had signed a contract. The book was real, and Meghan had no idea what her mother might say. Harry stopped pacing and crouched in front of her, his hands on her knees. "We'll fix this, Meg. I promise. There's got to be a way to stop her." Meghan finally looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "What if there isn't?" she whispered. "What if she's already written it? What if she tells them everything?" Harry's jaw clenched. "Then we get ahead of it. We issue a statement. We remind people how close you and your mom have always been. If this book comes out, we frame it as her perspective, not the truth." But Meghan shook her head. "You don't understand, Harry. If she talks about the bridesmaid dress or about the Queen." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Harry rubbed her back, his own expression darkening. He hated seeing Meghan like this, so fragile, so shaken. It reminded him too much of the days after they left the UK, when the weight of the press attacks and family rifts nearly broke her spirit. He had sworn then that he would protect her at all costs. But how do you protect someone from their own family? Across the Atlantic, the British media were already circling like vultures. On morning talk shows, commentators speculated endlessly about the memoir's contents. "What could Doria possibly reveal?" asked one host on a popular program. "We've heard Meghan and Harry's side of the story in that infamous Oprah interview. Could this be a completely different perspective?" A royal biographer chimed in with a knowing smile. "Let's not forget, Doria was there for key moments in Meghan's life. She witnessed the royal wedding, the birth of Archie. If anyone has insight into Meghan's real character, it's her mother." Even in Hollywood, the whispers grew louder. Agents, producers, and former co-stars traded rumors about what might be included. Some speculated the memoir would delve into Meghan's early struggles in Hollywood, the roles she took, the relationships she pursued, and the powerful figures she allegedly encountered in her climb to fame. One producer who had worked with Meghan in her early acting days reportedly told a friend, "If Doria is willing to talk about those yacht parties, the whole world's going to see Meghan in a different light." Back in Montecito, Meghan's phone buzzed with another notification. She ignored it. She couldn't bear to see another headline. Instead, she turned to Harry, her voice trembling. "I have to talk to her. I have to make her understand." Harry hesitated. Maybe give it a day? She might be overwhelmed with calls right now. But Meghan shook her head fiercely. "No. If I wait, it'll be too late. She's already signed the deal. She's already made her choice. I need to hear her say it." She picked up her phone and dialed Doria's number with shaking fingers. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then voicemail. "Mom, it's me," Meghan said, her voice cracking. I don't know why you're doing this, but please call me back. Please. We need to talk. Don't let them use you to hurt me. Please." She hung up and stared at the screen, willing it to light up with a return call. But it remained dark. Harry placed a hand on her shoulder. "She'll call back." But Meghan wasn't so sure. For the first time in her life, she felt like a stranger to her own mother. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pristine lawns of their estate, Meghan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. The memory hit Meghan like a tidal wave, flooding her mind as she stared blankly at her phone screen. She could still hear the sharp words, see the strained expressions, and feel the suffocating weight of that day. The infamous bridesmaid dress row, a private moment that had somehow become a global scandal, was now threatening to resurface in its rawest, ugliest form. And this time, it wasn't coming from anonymous palace insiders or tabloid gossip. It was coming straight from her own mother. It had started innocently enough back then, in the hectic days leading up to her royal wedding. St. George's Chapel was abuzz with preparations. Designers rushed in and out, florists debated over arrangements, and Meghan was juggling a million details to ensure her wedding to Prince Harry was flawless. But beneath the surface of joy and celebration, tensions were brewing. The issue was the bridesmaid dresses, specifically Princess Charlotte's dress. Meghan had wanted a modern, sleek design for the young girls, a departure from the traditional royal style. Kate Middleton, however, had reservations. Sources later claimed Kate felt the dresses were inappropriate for the occasion, too ill-fitting for little girls, and insisted changes be made. The two women met to discuss the matter, but the conversation quickly spiraled out of control. Meghan remembered standing in the middle of Nottingham Cottage's small sitting room, her hands clenched tightly at her sides. Kate, ever the epitome of composure in public, seemed visibly flustered and close to tears. The disagreement escalated as Meghan pushed back, frustrated at what she perceived as unnecessary rigidity. And then she said it, words Meghan regretted the instant they left her lips. "Well, maybe if your schedule wasn't so busy, you could have tried harder to make this work sooner." Kate's eyes welled up, and she excused herself abruptly. The fallout was swift. Within days, the British press ran headlines accusing Meghan of making Kate cry. Tearful Kate at odds with Meghan over Princess Charlotte's dress blared across front pages. Meghan felt blindsided. It wasn't the full story, not even close. In her now famous Oprah interview, Meghan claimed it had been the reverse. Kate had made her cry, not the other way around. She was upset about something, but she owned it, and she apologized, Meghan said at the time. And she brought me flowers. But Doria had been there. She had seen the argument unfold with her own eyes. She had witnessed Meghan's sharp tone, Kate's wounded expression, and the silence that hung heavy in the room after Kate left. If Doria chose to recount that moment in her memoir, if she presented her version of events, it could completely undermine Meghan's carefully crafted narrative. What if she tells them I was the one who started it? Meghan whispered to Harry as they sat in their Montecito kitchen, the soft glow of the pendant lights illuminating their drawn faces. What if she makes it sound like I bullied Kate? That's exactly what they've wanted all along. Harry rubbed his temples, his frustration simmering just beneath the surface. Meg, it was years ago. Even if she writes about it, people will understand you were under enormous pressure. No, they won't, Meghan said sharply. You don't understand how the British press works. They'll twist it. They'll make me the villain again. Her voice cracked, and she buried her face in her hands. Harry reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her back. We don't know for sure that she's going to mention it. Maybe she's just writing about her own life, her childhood, her work, her experiences. Meghan lifted her head, her eyes brimming with tears. You didn't hear her back then, Harry. You weren't there. She said I should be more careful, that my words cut deeper than I realize. If she's been holding on to that all this time, what else is she holding on to? The truth was, Meghan and Doria's relationship had never fully recovered from that period. Doria had supported Meghan throughout her engagement and wedding, but she had also been cautious, even critical at times, of Meghan's approach to her new royal life. You're not in Hollywood anymore, Doria had told her one evening after dinner at Frogmore Cottage. These people play by different rules. Meghan had bristled. I know what I'm doing, Mom. I'm not going to let them walk all over me. Doria had sighed, shaking her head. Just remember, sometimes it's not about winning the fight. It's about keeping the peace. But Meghan hadn't listened. And now, as she sat in her kitchen years later, the words came back to haunt her. Across the world, speculation about Doria's memoir was intensifying. One British commentator, speaking on a primetime news panel, claimed to have inside knowledge of the book's content. I've been told that Ms. Ragland plans to address the infamous bridesmaid dress incident, the commentator said. She wants to set the record straight, not to attack Meghan, but to explain her own perspective as a mother who witnessed the pressures of royal life firsthand. The words sent a chill down Meghan's spine. Harry's phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at it and swore under his breath. Another headline had just broken. Doria Ragland memoir expected to reveal Meghan's role in royal feud with Kate Middleton. Meghan felt a wave of nausea. She pushed her chair back and stumbled toward the sink, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. Harry was beside her in an instant, his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. Breathe, Meg. Don't let them do this to you. But it wasn't just them anymore. It wasn't the tabloids, the royal family, or the critics Meghan had long battled. This time, it was her mother. And Meghan couldn't shake the terrifying thought that maybe, just maybe, Doria wouldn't hold back. The air in Windsor Castle had felt colder than usual that day. Or maybe it was Meghan's own unease that made her shiver as she walked the long corridors. The grandeur of the place was overwhelming. Portraits of monarchs gazing down sternly from gilded frames, priceless chandeliers glinting like frozen waterfalls overhead, and the faint echo of footsteps on centuries-old stone floors. But it wasn't the royal splendor that unsettled Meghan. It was the audience she was about to have with the Queen. In the early days of her engagement to Harry, Meghan had gone out of her way to project respect and warmth toward Harry's grandmother. Publicly, she spoke of her admiration for the Queen's service and poise, often comparing her to the grandmothers she had known growing up. But behind palace doors, the dynamic had been more complicated. Meghan had never liked feeling as though she were under a microscope, and that's exactly how she felt during those early interactions with the monarch. Every word, every gesture, every pause was scrutinized not only by royal aides but by the Queen herself, whose piercing blue eyes seemed to miss nothing. Doria, visiting from Los Angeles, had been present during one such encounter, a luncheon at Windsor meant to be informal, but which carried the weight of royal protocol. The lunch had started well enough. Meghan smiled politely as the Queen spoke of her corgis and the extensive renovations planned for Windsor's private apartments. But when conversation turned to Meghan's upcoming wedding and her plans for life as a duchess, a subtle tension entered the room. "I understand you plan to continue with your acting career even after marriage," the Queen remarked lightly, sipping her tea. Meghan, caught off guard, nodded. "I'd like to, Your Majesty. It's been such a huge part of my life, and I think there's room for me to keep working in a way that complements my royal duties." The Queen set her cup down gently, but her expression hardened slightly. "The crown is not compatible with personal ambitions, my dear. One must choose a path." Doria later told friends how she felt the temperature in the room drop in that moment. Meghan stiffened slightly, but forced a polite smile. "Of course, Your Majesty. I only meant that I'd like to find a balance. I want to contribute to the royal family while staying true to myself." The Queen's lips pressed into a thin line. "One finds oneself in service, Meghan. That is the balance." It wasn't an outright rebuke, but it carried a sharpness that stung. Meghan didn't respond, and an awkward silence fell over the table until Harry jumped in to change the subject. That evening, in the privacy of her and Harry's temporary quarters at Frogmore House, Meghan vented to Doria. "She talks to me like I'm some sort of pet project," Meghan said, pacing back and forth. "As if I don't know how to carry myself. I'm an intelligent woman. I've worked hard my entire life. Why does she get to dictate who I am now?" Doria, ever the peacemaker, tried to calm her daughter. "Baby, this is her world. She's been at this a long time. Maybe she just needs time to understand where you're coming from." But Meghan shook her head. "It's not about understanding. It's about control." Doria didn't press the matter then, but she remembered it. Years later, as Doria drafted her memoir, she returned to that memory again and again. To her, it was emblematic of Meghan's struggles in the royal family, the clash between a modern, outspoken woman and an institution steeped in centuries of rigid tradition. But others might not see it the same way. When news of Doria's book deal broke, speculation swirled that she would include details of Meghan's relationship with the Queen. One article in a British tabloid quoted an anonymous source claiming Doria had confided that Meghan clashed privately with the Queen on multiple occasions and felt dismissed and patronized in their meetings. The idea horrified Meghan. She had worked tirelessly to maintain the narrative of mutual respect between herself and Harry's grandmother, especially after the Queen's death. Any suggestion of disrespect, real or perceived, could ruin that image forever. What if she tells them about the lunch? Meghan whispered to Harry as they sat together on the patio under the Montecito stars. "They'll twist it. They'll make it sound like I was rude to her, like I thought I was better than the Queen." Harry took her hand in his thumb brushing over her trembling fingers. "Meg, the world already made up its mind about you years ago. Anyone who wants to believe you were rude will believe it no matter what." "That doesn't make it easier," Meghan murmured. Harry sighed. "We don't even know if she's going to write about it. Maybe she'll leave those moments out." Meghan looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Do you really believe that?" Harry didn't answer. Across town, in her quiet Los Angeles home, Doria sat at her writing desk, staring at the words on her screen. "I watched my daughter walk into a world that promised her everything and demanded even more. She wanted so badly to belong, but she was never allowed to forget she was an outsider. I tried to guide her, to remind her that sometimes you have to bend a little to survive. But Meghan has never been one to bend. She paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She thought about deleting the paragraph, worried it might sound too harsh. But she left it. After all, this was her story, and she was tired of staying silent. Long before she was a duchess, before she was the face of a global brand or the center of royal controversy, Meghan Markle was just another ambitious young woman trying to make her mark in Hollywood. Those who knew her in those days describe a version of Meghan that feels almost unrecognizable now. Hungry, determined, and fiercely protective of her trajectory to stardom. It was a world of glittering lights and whispered promises, where aspiring actresses rubbed shoulders with the powerful men who could make or break their dreams. And it was in that very world that Meghan carved out her path, navigating the complexities of fame, attention, and survival in an industry that devoured the weak. For years, Meghan worked tirelessly, taking whatever roles she could get, small parts in TV pilots that never aired, brief appearances in films, even hosting gigs on low-budget cable shows. But beneath the surface of the bright smiles and red carpet photos was a young woman fully aware that one wrong step could end her career before it began. Doria had watched from the sidelines during those years, both proud of her daughter's drive and uneasy about the price she might have to pay. She was always so focused, Doria reportedly wrote in her private notes. But Hollywood isn't kind to girls like Meghan, girls with ambition, girls who won't play by their rules. I worried about her constantly. But despite her mother's concerns, Meghan thrived in the cutthroat environment. She learned how to charm casting directors, network at industry parties, and carefully manage her image even in her earliest days. Still, there were rumors, unflattering ones, that lingered long after Meghan's star began to rise. As news of Doria's memoir spread, speculation flared that the book might touch on those early years, including the whispers about Meghan's connections to wealthy and powerful men in Hollywood and beyond. One particularly persistent rumor involved Meghan's alleged attendance at exclusive yacht parties hosted by international billionaires and movie moguls. These parties were notorious in entertainment circles, floating palaces of excess where celebrities, models, and rising starlets mingled with the elite in a haze of champagne and secrecy. The tabloids had hinted at Meghan's supposed presence on such yachts for years, though no concrete evidence had ever surfaced. Meghan had always vehemently denied these stories, dismissing them as sexist attempts to undermine her accomplishments. But Doria's perspective could change everything. She didn't approve of some of the company Meghan kept back then, said an unnamed family friend to a British magazine. There were men who offered her access and opportunities, and Doria worried it might come at a cost. She always told Meghan to be careful about who she trusted. In Montecito, Meghan's anxiety over the memoir grew with each passing hour. She sat on the edge of her bed, her phone lying face down beside her. If she writes about those parties, if she even hints at them, they'll believe it, Meghan whispered. Harry looked at her, his brow furrowed. They believed worse, Meg. And we've survived. This is different, she snapped, her voice trembling. This isn't some faceless source or a tabloid hack. This is my mother. If she writes it, people will take it as truth. Harry hesitated before speaking. Do you really think she'd betray you like that? Meghan stared at him for a long moment, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. I don't know anymore. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Doria continued to write. Her fingers moved slowly over the keyboard as she reflected on Meghan's formative years. She was so determined to succeed, she typed. She wanted to be more than just another pretty face in a sea of pretty faces. She wanted to leave her mark, and she was willing to work harder than anyone else to do it. But there were times I worried she was working too hard, sacrificing too much of herself for a dream that didn't always love her back. I warned her about the sharks in those waters, but Meghan was convinced she could handle them. Doria paused, her eyes scanning the words she had just written. Should she include more? Should she mention the names, the parties, the rumors? Or would that cross a line she could never come back from? For Doria, the memoir wasn't about revenge or betrayal. It was about her truth, a chance to finally tell her side of the story after years of standing silently in the shadows. But she knew that some truths had the power to destroy. In the public eye, Meghan's carefully constructed image as a philanthropist and feminist icon left little room for scandal. Even the faintest suggestion of impropriety could undo years of work. Already, media outlets were speculating wildly about what Doria might reveal. A segment on a British morning show featured a panel of commentators debating Meghan's Hollywood past. "Let's not forget," one journalist said, "Meghan was hardly an A-lister when she met Harry." If Doria writes candidly about her daughter's journey through Hollywood, it could explain a lot about how Meghan navigates fame today. Another panelist chimed in. Or it could backfire spectacularly. This might be the end of the Sussex brand as we know it. For Meghan, every hour that passed without a response from Doria felt like an eternity. She had called, texted, even emailed, pleading for her mother to talk to her, to reassure her that the worst of her fears were unfounded. But there was no reply. Harry watched helplessly as Meghan's composure crumbled. She sat curled on the sofa, her knees drawn to her chest, staring blankly at the muted television screen as yet another news anchor dissected Doria's impending memoir. "This will destroy me," Meghan whispered. Harry sat down beside her, pulling her into his arms. "No, it won't. We'll get through this. Together." But in the pit of his stomach, Harry felt a gnawing dread he couldn't shake. This wasn't a battle against the press or the palace. This was something far more dangerous. This was family, and family knew exactly where to aim to hurt you the most. The house was quiet, unnaturally so. The Montecito estate, normally alive with the faint hum of staff shuffling about and the sounds of Archie and Lilibet playing in the garden, felt heavy, suffocating. Meghan sat curled up on the floor of their master bedroom, her back pressed against the oak dresser. Her knees were pulled tightly to her chest, her face buried in her hands. Silent tears soaked her palms, and her shoulders trembled with every uneven breath. Harry stood at the doorway, his heart breaking as he took in the sight of her. For years, he had vowed to shield her from the cruelty of the outside world, whether it was the British press with their relentless attacks or the cold detachment of royal courtiers. But nothing had prepared him for this. This wasn't an enemy he could fight. This wasn't a tabloid he could sue or a royal aide he could scold. This was Doria, Meghan's mother, the one person Harry had believed would always stand firmly in her daughter's corner. "Meg," he said softly, stepping into the room. Meghan didn't move. "Meg, love, please look at me." When she finally lifted her head, Harry felt a pang deep in his chest. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. She looked utterly broken in a way he hadn't seen since the darkest days of their departure from the royal family. "She's going to ruin me, Harry," Meghan whispered, her voice hoarse. "She's going to ruin everything." Harry dropped to his knees beside her, his hands gently cradling her face. "No, she's not. Listen to me. We don't even know what she's written. It might not be as bad as you think." Meghan shook her head violently, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't understand. She was there, Harry. She saw things, heard things, things I've spent years trying to move on from. If she tells the world..." Her voice broke, and she pressed her hands to her mouth to muffle the sob that escaped. Harry pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as though he could shield her from the storm that was already brewing outside their walls. "We'll handle this," he murmured against her hair. "We've faced worse, and we survived. We'll get through this too." But even as he spoke the words, a gnawing doubt twisted in his stomach. This wasn't like before. The betrayal didn't come from strangers or even from distant relatives. This was Doria, the woman Meghan had trusted more than anyone else in the world. Meghan clung to Harry, her fingers gripping the fabric of his shirt like a lifeline. "Why is she doing this to me?" she whispered. "Why now?" Harry didn't have an answer. Downstairs, Meghan's phone vibrated against the marble countertop in the kitchen. Another notification. Another headline. Doria Ragland memoir. Sources claim Meghan and Harry will be mortified by secrets inside. The media frenzy had reached a fever pitch. Every news outlet was running with the story, speculating about what Doria might reveal. Was it the bridesmaid dress row? Meghan's private conversations with the Queen? Or the long-whispered rumors about her Hollywood past? Paparazzi had already started camping outside the gates of the Montecito estate, hoping to catch a glimpse of Meghan in the midst of her turmoil. Drones buzzed in the skies above, their cameras trained on the sprawling property. Harry had doubled security and instructed staff to turn away anyone who came asking questions. But it wasn't enough. The real threat wasn't out there. It was in Los Angeles, sitting in front of a computer screen, typing away at memories that could unravel everything Meghan had built. "She won't even answer my calls," Meghan murmured, her voice almost too soft to hear. "I've tried everything. Texts, emails, nothing." Harry stroked her hair gently. "Maybe she needs time. Maybe she's overwhelmed too." Meghan looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and anger. "Or maybe she doesn't care anymore." Harry flinched at the bitterness in her voice. "You don't mean that," he said quietly. Meghan turned her face away. "Don't I? She knows what they'll do with this. She knows how they'll spin every word. And she's still going ahead with it." There was a long silence. Finally, Harry spoke. "Then we go to her. In person. No calls, no messages. We drive to LA, knock on her door, and talk to her face to face." Meghan hesitated. "What if she won't listen?" she whispered. "Then we make her listen," Harry said firmly. For a brief moment, Meghan allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could stop this before it was too late. But deep down, a part of her feared that the damage had already been done. By the time the sun rose over Montecito the next morning, the firestorm had already engulfed the world. It started slowly, as it always did, just a few speculative headlines on gossip blogs and small entertainment news sites. But within hours, the story had spread like a virus, infecting every corner of the media. Television anchors, radio hosts, and social media influencers all had the same urgent tone as they spoke the words Meghan dreaded most. Doria Ragland's tell-all memoir threatens to undo everything Meghan and Harry have built, declared a stern-faced commentator on one of Britain's most watched morning shows. "This could be the royal scandal of the decade," another journalist added gravely, speaking to millions of viewers on an American cable network. Sources say Meghan is terrified of what her mother will reveal. It didn't matter that Doria hadn't spoken a word publicly beyond the carefully worded statement announcing her book. It didn't matter that no one knew for certain what the memoir contained. The speculation alone was enough to feed a narrative Meghan had fought for years to suppress. On Twitter, hashtags like #DoriaSpeaks, #MeghanExposed, and #RoyalTellAll began trending worldwide. Some users expressed excitement at the possibility of hearing Doria's perspective. Others accused her of betrayal, calling her a traitor and a backstabber. But the most vicious attacks were reserved for Meghan. Meghan's own mother wants to expose her lies, one tweet read, racking up thousands of likes and retweets in minutes. "If Doria is speaking out, you know Meghan's skeletons must be bad," wrote another user, their comment going viral almost instantly. Within hours, the tabloids had dug deep into their archives, rehashing every rumor and controversy Meghan had ever been linked to. The bridesmaid dress row, her supposed coldness to palace staff, the rift with her father, even her earliest acting gigs. They were all plastered across front pages again, as if they had never faded from memory. For Meghan, it felt like déjà vu. She had lived through this before. The relentless scrutiny, the cruel headlines, the online hatred that seemed to multiply with every passing second. But this time was different. This time, she couldn't dismiss it as lies or bias. This time, it was her own mother who had opened the door. "Harry, they're eating me alive," Meghan whispered as she scrolled through her phone, her face pale and stricken. "They're saying things I can't even repeat." Harry gently took the phone from her trembling hands and set it aside. "Stop reading it, Meg. None of it matters. It's noise." Meghan shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "It's not just noise. It's my reputation. It's our lives. Everything we've worked for. They're tearing it apart." Harry pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. But even as he whispered words of comfort, his mind raced. He had known that marrying Meghan would come with challenges. He had seen firsthand how the press could twist stories and manufacture villains. But he had believed they could overcome anything as long as they stood together. Now, for the first time, he wondered if this storm might be too big even for them. Across the Atlantic, in the UK, the royal family maintained their usual stoic silence. Buckingham Palace declined to comment on Doria's book, refusing even to acknowledge the media frenzy. But insiders whispered that behind closed doors, there was a sense of vindication. "This isn't just a PR nightmare for Meghan," one palace aide reportedly told a journalist off the record. "It's proof that her own family doesn't trust her version of events." that says more than any statement ever could. On American talk shows, pundits debated the ethics of Doria's decision. Is it really betrayal if she's telling her own story? One host asked, her tone thoughtful. She's Meghan's mother. Another panelist shot back. You don't air family dirty laundry for the world to see. This is unforgivable. Meanwhile, Hollywood insiders whispered about potential fallout for Meghan and Harry's business ventures. Netflix executives were reportedly nervous about their multi-million-dollar deal with the couple, fearing that public opinion might turn against them. Spotify, still reeling from earlier controversies, was said to be monitoring the situation closely. A leaked email from a brand Meghan had partnered with revealed even more cracks in her carefully constructed public image. We are reviewing our relationship with the Duchess of Sussex in light of recent developments, the email read. In Montecito, Meghan sat in the living room, staring at her reflection in the darkened television screen. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her, tired, fragile, and weighed down by a sense of dread she couldn't shake. They're going to cancel me, Harry, she said quietly. I can feel it. Everything we've built, it's slipping away. Harry knelt beside her, his voice firm. No one is canceling you, Meg. You've survived worse. We've survived worse. This isn't the end. But Meghan didn't respond. Because deep down, she wasn't so sure anymore. Buckingham Palace had always been a fortress, imposing not just in its physical grandeur, but in the unspoken rules of silence and restraint that governed its inner workings. From the outside, it appeared almost serene, the Union Jack fluttering gently above its gates, tourists gathering to take photos, and guards in their crimson tunics standing stone-faced. But inside, behind the centuries-old walls and velvet-draped corridors, the atmosphere was anything but calm. When word of Doria Ragland's memoir reached the palace, the response was not public outrage or scandalous press statements. It was something far more chilling. Nothing. No official comment. No anonymous aides briefing journalists on background. No leaks to friendly tabloids. Just silence. A deliberate, strategic quiet that was louder than any words could have been. To the world, the royal family appeared unfazed. But to those who knew them, the stillness was a signal in itself. The palace's silence is not accidental, said a royal historian on a popular British current affairs program. They know that staying quiet allows the storm to engulf Meghan on its own. If Doria's book paints an unflattering picture of her daughter, the palace won't need to lift a finger. Public opinion will do the work for them. In private, however, whispers spread among the royal household. King Charles, reportedly still nursing wounds from Harry and Meghan's explosive Oprah interview and subsequent projects, was said to have raised an eyebrow when an aide brought him the news. Well, he had murmured, according to one source. It appears the chickens have come home to roost. Camilla, Queen Consort, was allegedly more blunt in her assessment during a private luncheon with friends. I always said there was more to that girl than meets the eye, she was reported to have remarked, her voice tinged with quiet satisfaction. But it was Prince William who seemed the most conflicted. While he had little sympathy left for Harry and Meghan after years of family tension, he also knew that public family feuds left scars no amount of royal protocol could cover. They'll never recover from this, William was overheard telling a close advisor. Not if even her own mother is turning against her. At Kensington Palace, Kate was said to have remained carefully neutral. She made no comment, either in public or in private, about Doria's memoir. Yet aides couldn't help but notice the faintest flicker of relief in her eyes. The old narrative, that Meghan had reduced her to tears over a bridesmaid dress, was being resurrected, but this time from a source far harder to dismiss. Meanwhile, British tabloids reveled in the palace's silence, spinning it into a narrative of quiet vindication. "The Crown speaks without words," blared one headline. Another declared, "Doria's bombshell leaves Harry and Meghan alone and exposed. Palace maintains dignified silence." In Montecito, Meghan read the headlines with trembling hands. The silence from London felt louder than any attack. She knew how the game was played. The lack of comment was strategic. It allowed the media to do the palace's bidding without them ever having to lift a finger. "They're enjoying this," Meghan whispered bitterly to Harry as they sat together in their sunlit kitchen. "They're probably laughing about it right now, telling themselves they were right about me all along." Harry's jaw tightened, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped his coffee mug. Don't give them that power, Meg. You know they'll spin anything into proof that they were justified. They don't even have to spin it this time, she shot back, her voice cracking. My own mother handed them the ammunition. Harry reached across the table and grabbed her hand. We don't know that yet. We don't know what she's written. But Meghan pulled her hand away and stood abruptly. You're right. We don't know. And that's what terrifies me the most. In Los Angeles, Doria seemed untouched by the swirling chaos. Paparazzi had begun camping outside her modest home, hoping to catch a glimpse of the woman at the center of the world's most sensational family drama. But Doria remained out of sight, declining all requests for interviews and issuing no further statements. Still, whispers persisted about her motives. Doria has been in Meghan's shadow for years, said one commentator on a primetime news special. This book could be her way of stepping into the light, or it could be her attempt to reclaim her narrative from a daughter who has dominated it for too long. Others took a more cynical view. She's cashing in, declared a British tabloid columnist. Plain and simple. The mother of Meghan Markle is about to profit from the daughter who made her famous. But there were also voices defending Doria's decision. Why shouldn't she tell her story? Asked a feminist writer in a widely shared essay. For years, Meghan has spoken about her truth, her struggles, her journey. Isn't Doria entitled to the same? Back in Montecito, Meghan sat alone in her dressing room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She's supposed to be my mother, Meghan whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. She's supposed to protect me. But the reflection staring back at her offered no comfort. For the first time in years, Meghan felt like a pawn in someone else's game. And in the royal world, whether she liked it or not, pawns were always the first to fall. The car ride to Los Angeles was long and tense. Meghan sat in the back seat, staring blankly out the tinted window as the California landscape blurred past. Rolling hills, palm trees, and strip malls flickered by, but she barely registered them. Her mind was a whirlpool of fear, anger, and confusion, pulling her under with every passing mile. Harry sat beside her, his hand resting gently on her knee. He had suggested they make the trip alone, without staff or security. This was family, he'd argued. It needed to be handled face-to-face, without the trappings of royalty or celebrity. But Meghan couldn't shake the dread coiling in her stomach. What if Doria refused to see them? What if the conversation turned into a fight? What if it was already too late? As they pulled up to the modest bungalow in View Park, Meghan's heart pounded so loudly she thought Harry could hear it. The house looked the same as it always had. Simple, unpretentious, with a neatly trimmed lawn and a small garden out front. It was a far cry from the sprawling Montecito estate Meghan now called home. This is where I learned to dream, Meghan whispered, her voice cracking. Harry squeezed her hand. Then let's hope it's where we can find some answers too. They walked up the path in silence, Meghan's heels clicking softly against the concrete. When they reached the front door, Meghan hesitated. Her finger hovered over the doorbell for a long moment before she finally pressed it. There was no answer. She pressed it again. Still nothing. Harry glanced at her, his brow furrowed. Maybe she's not home. But Meghan shook her head. She's here. She's avoiding me. Her hand balled into a fist, and she knocked sharply. Mom, it's me. Please, we need to talk. For a few agonizing seconds, there was only silence. Then, slowly, the door creaked open. Doria stood there, looking tired but calm. She was dressed simply in yoga pants and a loose sweater, her hair tied back. She regarded Meghan and Harry with an unreadable expression. Meghan, Harry, Mom, please, Meghan said, her voice trembling. We need to talk. Can we come in? Doria hesitated, then stepped aside. All right, come in. The air inside the house was warm and faintly scented with jasmine. Meghan felt a pang of nostalgia as she stepped over the threshold. So many memories lived in these walls. Childhood birthdays, late-night talks, the quiet comfort of her mother's embrace. But today, there was no comfort. Only tension so thick it felt like walking through fog. They sat in the living room, Meghan perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands twisting in her lap. Harry remained standing, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Why, Mom? Meghan finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this to me? Doria took a deep breath. I'm not doing anything to you, Meghan. I'm telling my story. Your story. Meghan's voice rose. Do you have any idea what you're about to do? Do you know how this will look? How they'll use it against me? Doria's expression softened, but she didn't flinch. I know exactly how it will look. I've been wah. This isn't about truth, Meghan shot back, her hands trembling. It's about betrayal. You're my mother. You're supposed to protect me, not hand my enemies a weapon. Harry stepped forward, his voice low but firm. Doria, whatever you think you're doing, this is going to hurt Meghan and the children. Please reconsider before it's too late. Doria's gaze shifted to Harry. I understand your concern, Harry. But this isn't about hurting anyone. This is about me finally having a voice. Meghan's eyes filled with tears. I gave you a voice, Mom. I brought you into my world. I defended you when Dad tried to sell his story. I made sure you were safe. And I'm grateful for that, Doria said gently. But Meghan, this isn't about gratitude. It's about me reclaiming my life. For too long, I've been reduced to a footnote in your story. I want people to know who I am, not just as Meghan Markle's mother, but as Doria Ragland. Meghan buried her face in her hands, a sob escaping her lips. Harry sat down beside her, his arm wrapping protectively around her shoulders. Please, Meghan whispered. If you love me at all, stop this. Don't let them tear me apart again. Doria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I do love you, Meghan, more than anything. But love doesn't mean silence. I've been silent for too long. The room fell into heavy silence. Finally, Doria spoke again, her voice firm. The manuscript is done. The deal is signed. I can't stop it now. Meghan looked up at her mother, her face pale and stricken. Then you've chosen your side. Doria flinched, but said nothing. Harry stood abruptly, his jaw tight. We should go. Meghan didn't protest as he helped her to her feet. She felt numb, hollowed out. As they walked to the door, Meghan paused and turned back to her mother. Don't expect forgiveness, she said softly. Not this time. Doria's lips trembled, but she didn't reply. When the door closed behind them, Meghan felt the finality of it deep in her bones. Something had broken that day, something that could never be put back together. The world was split in two. By the time Meghan and Harry returned to Montecito, the internet had erupted into a battlefield of opinions. News outlets across continents carried wall-to-wall coverage of Doria Ragland's decision to write her memoir. Talk shows dissected every angle, podcasts speculated wildly, and social media was ablaze with hashtags that reflected a deep and bitter divide. Hashtag Team Doria and hashtag Protect Meghan trended simultaneously, each gathering millions of posts within hours. On one side were those who applauded Doria for speaking her truth. She's been silent for too long, tweeted one user. For years, Meghan has told her side of the story. Why shouldn't her mother have the same right? I think Doria's been a class act, wrote another. If she's breaking her silence now, there must be something important she needs to say. Maybe Meghan isn't as innocent as she wants us to believe. But on the other side, Meghan's defenders rallied fiercely, accusing Doria of betrayal and greed. This is the ultimate act of treachery, posted a fan account devoted to Meghan. How could a mother do this to her own daughter? Shameful. She's cashing in on Meghan's fame, claimed another. This is Thomas Markle all over again. Everywhere Meghan turned, her phone, the TV, even overheard snippets of conversation among her own staff. There was no escape. Her life, her family, her reputation had become the world's favorite debate. In the Montecito mansion, Meghan wandered from room to room like a ghost. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop for hours, each new notification another spike of anxiety. Don't read it, Harry warned her, following close behind. Meg, I mean it. Put the phone down. It'll only make it worse. But she couldn't stop. She scrolled endlessly through Twitter, Instagram, and news articles, her chest tightening with every comment and headline. She's a manipulator, and now her own mom's exposing her. I feel sorry for Doria. Imagine what she's had to endure all these years. Meghan is probably begging her mother to stay silent. That says it all. Every word felt like a knife. They hate me, Meghan whispered, her voice barely audible. They've always hated me. But now they'll believe everything. Harry reached for her phone, prying it gently from her hands. Enough. Please, Meg. You're torturing yourself. I need to know what they're saying, she said, her eyes wild. If I don't know, I can't fight it. Harry's face hardened. You can't fight this. Not like before. This isn't the press. It's not even the royals. It's your mother. And once that book comes out, it's out. We can't control it. Meghan sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. There has to be a way. There has to be something we can do. Harry sat beside her, rubbing her back in slow circles. He wanted to reassure her, to tell her they'd find a solution. But deep down, he knew the truth. There was no stopping this. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Doria's team released a carefully worded statement in response to the growing media frenzy. Ms. Ragland's forthcoming memoir is a deeply personal account of her own life experiences. It is not intended as an attack on any individual. She hopes readers will approach it with compassion and an open mind. But the statement did little to calm the storm. Television pundits were quick to point out that the book didn't have to be an attack to be damaging. Even neutral observations could confirm long-standing rumors or cast Meghan in a different light. What if she confirms the bridesmaid dress row? Asked a British royal commentator on live TV. What if she discusses Meghan's alleged clashes with palace staff or the Queen? Those are the details people want to know. A prominent American journalist went even further. There are whispers that Doria's book may touch on Meghan's Hollywood years in a way that raises eyebrows. If true, this could completely rewrite how the public views the Duchess of Sussex. In private, Meghan's paranoia grew with each passing hour. "They're all waiting for me to fall," she said to Harry one night as they sat in bed. "The royals, the press, the public. They're all hoping this book will be the final nail in my coffin." Harry wrapped his arms around her. "You're not going to fall. You're stronger than they think." But Meghan shook her head. "Not this time. This isn't like before. They can forgive a distant relative, a palace aide, even my father. But my mother? If she turns on me, they'll believe every word she says." Harry tightened his hold on her. "Then we don't give them the satisfaction. We stay united. No matter what she writes, we face it together." But even as he spoke the words, a sliver of doubt crept into his mind. Because deep down, Harry feared Meghan might be right, and the world was already choosing sides.